Thanks very much to everybody for joining us. Really super topic that we've got today, focused around tenant experience, particularly, and the future of that, and particularly in the residential side. Let's start with introductions of the panel. Sander, let's start with you. Brief introduction of yourself and the company.
Yeah, so first of all, great to be here today. My name is Sander Versput. I'm co-founder and CEO at Channels. Channels is a tenant experience app, a PropTech company based in Rotterdam. Personally, I have a background in real estate and housing management at Delft University of Technology. One of my great passions is really to bring IT to the real estate industry. And that's what we already do for 10 years, delivering this platform for multi-tenant properties. And happy to share today our insights from our residential survey.
Great, thanks, Sander. Over to you, Jack.
Great, thank you very much for having me today. My name is Jack Renteria. I'm a Canadian Dane. I live in Copenhagen, Denmark. I work for a privately owned development firm called Alpha Development, where I'm the director of Living Concepts. And I'm also the co-chair of the ULI Europe Living Concepts Product Council, where we discuss themes and typologies within these new and evolving sectors. At Alpha, we are currently launching Denmark's first fully serviced build-to-rent community. And I really believe that many of these new living concepts are kind of born into technology. And so actively using this first BTR project as a playground for testing new initiatives and innovations is very important to me.
Great, thanks. And over to you, Esther.
Well, thanks for having us. Pleasure to be here. I'm Esteban Amiral. I'm a global managing director and partner at Node. Node is an asset manager, property manager, focusing on flexible living and co-living. We are headquartered in London with offices in Madrid, Barcelona, and Dublin. We've got a pipeline of about 7,000 units being developed across the European continent. My background is real estate and technology. I'm born in Spain, having spent over a decade in the US. And I was secondly at a company called Star City, that we were one of the pioneers on the co-living space in the United States.
Great, really interesting to have these perspectives across the panel. And Sander, it would be great just to share, I guess, some details in terms of the survey that you did, and also the 4 topics that we're going to look at, and maybe introduce that first topic as well.
Thank you, Richard. So first of all, really happy to share our survey results with you today, because we had an amazing number of participants. There were 1,750 people responding to our survey across 3 countries. And we summarized that all within a research piece. So after this webinar, we will be sending you a copy, and feel free to get in touch for any additional insights as well. A little bit of background on the respondents. So there were 3 tenant types represented that covers student housing, mid-market, as well as high-end housing across the Netherlands, France, and the UK. Here you see the different age categories that were represented. And generally, we had respondents from the build-to-rent, co-living, and student housing sector. And what characterized them as well is that we were interviewing people living in multi-tenant properties. So how are tenants' priorities actually changing across the last period, which is really, I think, a relevant question. So what we did is we asked the respondents, what are important factors for you when you are looking to rent a rental property? And what really stood out, first of all, is that people are looking for the basic needs to be covered. So first of all, they're looking for a place that is peaceful, quiet, and that sustains their privacy as well as security. Then obviously the close proximity to certain facilities is important for them. But what we expected before we send out this survey is that proximity to school and work would be really the #1 factor. However, well-maintained shared spaces with 88% was even higher in the ranking. So people really value that. And what we believe from these results is that people started, mainly due to Corona, to work more and more from home. So location is less of an important factor. And we also see some landlords stepping into this trend by, for example, providing co-working spaces and additional services and amenities to the living environment. So that's really really interesting. And here you see some other factors that still have an impact, like multiple transport options, Wi-Fi, easy access to green spaces. So that's, I think, really the key takeaway from this part of the survey, is that there's really a shift in the living expectations. And I think, or we think, that COVID really accelerated that. And the fact that people work from home a few days a week, requires different strategies from landlords and different type of living environments. And I think that's a great moment to open up the discussion.
Maybe let's start with you, Jack, just in terms of your perspective on that, and then I'll come to you as well, Estelle.
Well, what I kind of noticed from this was that the customer is expecting more. You know, we really have seen an evolution over the past few years now, where, you know, a rental apartment was just an apartment. And now we've gone into like a new phase where we're really seeing a lot of the drivers, which are moving people more and more into the rental market, that are also creating a demand for more than just the apartment, but also the hard product, which is like space for co-working, you know, lounges, amenity spaces, alongside the soft product, things like security, sense of community.
Estelle, what's your take on that?
People are no longer attending the office 5 days a week, and they're attending 3 days, 4 days, 2 days, depending on the market, depending on the sector. And therefore, these results in changes that take place in the place where people live, and therefore in the products that we offer.
And Sander, were there any things that kind of surprised you, or what was your kind of overall take on that?
I think generally a lot of people also indicated that they're really willing to pay for this type of new experience. So 70% or even more than 70% indicate like, hey, if the landlord would be offering this, I would be willing to pay. Because you can also imagine, indeed, if you are working from home, living with your family, maybe you have a few kids, then it's really important that you can focus and you are kind of willing to move to a different space than only your home, basically. And there, I think a few landlords are already tapping into that trend. And obviously, I think something that stands out as well is that people value privacy as well. So they do like to interact with their neighbors in these type of common spaces, but it should be balanced. I think that's also something that we really saw in the data. Yeah.
I mean, this is a question. I mean, feel free, anybody, to pick this up. But do you think there's also a significant difference between different areas? Obviously, Jack, you're there in Denmark, for example. I mean, do you see this as something that is common across the whole of Europe, let's say, or do you see there being different, different focuses in different areas?
Well, what I really see is that we are moving away from looking at our buildings as just assets, and now looking at them more as products that are designed specifically for a demographic or for an area of the city. And that means that when we take a look at all of these, priorities, or all of the soft and hard, components of that Sander has listed here, I mean, what we have done in the last 3 years has taken kind of a research-driven approach, where we've identified different personas or different kinds of group segments that we would like to have in our building. And so what we've done is looked at what is their day like, what are their pain points, what are the things that they're going through in their life? And I can give you an example. One might be a young family living in a neighborhood in central Copenhagen, living on the 3rd floor of a walk-up. They have a young child. The child takes up all the space, and now they're having a second, expecting a number 2. And so we went through and really looked at what are all of the things that they might need in a new rental community. And so what we did was we created our product to be convenient for them. And so we're hoping that when we do this kind of a study, we're going to see that we really kind of hit the nail on the head in trying to attract them. And I can see that we have attracted them. When I look at where the people are moving from, they are moving from different neighborhoods of Copenhagen. We know that we have a certain percentage that are moving in that are under the age of 30 in their applications. Many of them are writing that they want to start a family. So we are seeing the benefits of having done this research to kind of tailor who we're going after so that we can offer the facilities and the services that they want.
And Esteve, do you get a sense that real estate is kind of behind on this or catching up on it? And do you think this is a much longer term trend or a sort of knee-jerk reaction to COVID? How do you see that?
I mean, I think absolutely real estate always takes longer. No, it's a slow burn. It takes long to build a product, and it takes long to capitalize the product, get it approved. I think there's a big difference, as you asked before, in terms of markets. I think you can really segment it within existing cities. Let's take Madrid, for example. One of the cities within the most active, probably one of the most active cities in the flexible living space in the continent today. And I think in terms of the physical product, what's being created, what's offered, it changes a lot on whether you're building within city center or whether you're building on the outskirts of the city. And the level of amenities that the neighborhood itself can offer to a resident, to a member, to a tenant. And this has a big impact on how we think about assets, how we conceptualize unit mix, and how we allocate and design communal spaces within an asset.
No, good. I think that's been really interesting, that topic, and we've got 4 topics to pick up on. So I think let's move on to the next one now, because I think there's a real focus on this that we've been seeing, and that's kind of how community enhances the living experience. So maybe just pick up on that, Sander, for us.
Yes. So let me move to the slide that is elaborating on this topic. So first off, we were wanting to get an understanding, like how important is community for people if they are living in a space. And actually it turned out to be quite important. So 67% indicated that they really value that there is a community in place. But since community can be quite a little bit of a vague term, we also wanted to ask, like, what is important for you in terms of a community? So what do you expect? What kind of value can it bring to you? So 39% indicated that it helps them to feel safe, which is quite a lot, to be honest. And furthermore, it brings people a vibrant atmosphere. It allows people to make friends. It means that people can rely on others when they need them. And also it makes people feel less lonely. So you can also imagine if you are maybe an expat starting to live in a new city, it really helps if you can make friends in the neighborhood, which is also, I think, really an opportunity for landlords to look into this topic, because if people are happy in the place where they live, they will stay longer and they will be a client for a longer time. And only 9% out of the respondents indicated that it doesn't bring any value to them. So this was, I think, quite interesting. Furthermore, we had a look at who should be responsible for creating this type of community in a residential building. And kind of the conclusion was that mainly the residents say it's their responsibility. However, 29% came up with it's the landlord or the community manager's responsibility. In the Netherlands, in a lot of cases, the landlord is kind of appointing a community manager. So they moved from concierge services to a community manager. So that's 53% if you add it up. And then the property manager and local authorities were bottom down the list. So yeah, of course, in the discussion, we can elaborate more on who should be in the end responsible. So from our perspective, the key takeaway was that it's a high priority. It can really improve well-being, improve the quality of life. But you should, of course, be looking at also the right tools to facilitate a sense of community. And I think we can open up the discussion. In my opinion, the landlord has a great responsibility in this, and they can also use, let's say, a digital layer to get a bit more understanding what is happening in the estate. Are people satisfied? What is, let's say, the tenant satisfaction level? What is happening that people are looking at? Yeah, I think we've made the community concept more tangible, and yeah, you can attach more values to it, I think, with these insights.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. And I mean, I remember in discussions around retail a few years ago, people talking about, you know, who were managing and running shopping centers saying, well, it's not really up to me, you know, what the retailers do inside the space is not my job, that's theirs. And then obviously there's been a change around in terms of the view on that. Jack, it'd be interesting to pick up your views on this, particularly in terms of, I guess, your reaction to the sort of analysis there. Does that match with what you're thinking? And does that make you think about how you're going to do things in the future as well?
Yes, actually. So I will bring in 2 points from the previous topic. One point that Sander had written in there, that location was not as important. And one point that Esteve has mentioned about amenities depending on different parts of the city. And then when we combine that with topic 2 and community, I'll tell you about what we're doing at the moment. We're looking at an area that is on the outskirts of Copenhagen. This area is the largest life sciences cluster in all of Denmark. It has thousands and thousands of specialist jobs where we have people from all over the world relocating to this area to work. And what we did was a collective intelligence exercise. So we went to the Confederation of Danish Industries and talked about the challenges of attracting talent to Denmark. Then we went to Copenhagen Capacity, which is helping them find housing. And then we went to the employers and the demographic itself. And all of them mentioned something: loneliness. All of them mentioned that it was, you know, once they were successful enough in attracting the talent, if this talent couldn't find friends or couldn't find a sense of community, they would leave. And it's the #1 reason for expats leaving Denmark. The Confederation of Danish Industries did the largest study on expats they've ever done. And they found that that was the #1 conclusion, that they will leave if they are lonely. And so when we spoke with the human resources teams from many of these life sciences clients, the life sciences companies, sorry, they mentioned this over and over again. We talked about the value of community. When we did our focus groups and showed our clubhouse and showed the types of amenities and the activities and the services that we would like to have, they were all over it. And they actually didn't care if it was in the center of the city or not, because they realized that they could go down to the clubhouse and make some friends. And they even articulated it as bluntly as that. The first 2 weeks, I'm going to go down, I'm going to hang out in the common kitchen, and I will make all the friends I need for the next 2 years. And I think we're striking at something that isn't really very apparent, but it's very much there. It's not visible, but it's inside. And it's very important to pay attention to that.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting perspective, Jack, there. Esteve, maybe just coming to you, I guess what's your take on that? And are there any examples as well that you've got from yours? Because I think that was really valuable, actually, Jack.
Absolutely. I fully agree with two of the points that have been discussed. The first one is the importance of community. Second one is when community is driven by residents. I'll touch first on the first one. What we've seen on existing data with residents is that residents who attend 4 or more events are 30% more likely to renew their leases with us than those who do not attend events or attend less than 4 events. Therefore, we see an engagement? We see an engagement from residents on staying longer with us, on being more likely to renew their lease with us if they are engaged in the community, if they have a sense of belonging, and if they participate within community events. And the second point, which I fully agree with the report and the slide that was presented, is the one that makes reference to who should be responsible for running the community events within the community. What we found is that as much as we try through community creators, through ambassadors, through different partnerships to put together events, every time we have an event or every month, there's an MPS that goes out to our residents, and through these MPS survey, we're able to get a sense of what's the perception of people, how people have enjoyed or not enjoyed an event. And we found that the highest rated MPS, the events with the biggest satisfaction from residents, the events with the greatest attendance, are those that are put up by existing residents. And therefore, I couldn't agree more on this slide that said who should be responsible for building community is the tenant, and absolutely should be the tenant, because the tenant is the one that has an interest, that goes down to the kitchen, the common kitchen for the first 2 weeks to make the friends for the next 2 years, and finds out about those people who share an interest with them, and really is able to rally the people behind the event to build community and to extend that community beyond the actual event.
Yeah, no, that's good. And I guess both to Jack and Esteb, in terms of the role of technology, which has obviously been growing quite considerably, how does that help build that community, would you say? Maybe first to you, Jack.
Well, you know, I think it's kind of funny in that I live in a condo, regular building where I've lived there for many years, and we have started to have these drinks with the neighbors. So we get into the courtyard and have these drink evenings, and it's something that happened relatively recently. And somebody said, you know, why did it take us 10 years before we got to know our neighbors and started doing these drinks? And in our living by alpha concept, I mean, it's taken them less than 10 days where they've all gotten to know each other through the app. Now, one of the most important things, though, was that each of them was onboarded individually. And so I really agree with Esteve in that he says some of the most successful events are the ones that they're putting on themselves. But what I see our role as being is being that person or that guide in how to get on the app and how to use it. That has been really important. So our community manager made a meeting with every single tenant and showed them the app, got them signed on to it, explained how it works. And so it took them a little bit of time to get used to it. But then after probably a month and a half, they started communicating with each other. And even though we would set the tone by putting on a few events like, you know, the popular one was wine tasting or gin tastings or things like this, where they could come down and get to know everybody. Those were nice for kind of icebreakers. And then eventually we saw, hey, I'm going to be binge watching this new show on Netflix down in the cinema. Whoever wants to join me can come and join me, and filled it up. You know, the other one said, now we've got this barbecue on the rooftop terrace. Let's have a grill evening. And it was super popular. And now they're doing it again next week. So they are starting to realize what they can do to facilitate this sense of community. And that's very nice to see.
And Esteve, it seems as though what would have been regarded as kind of relatively soft factors are actually becoming much more key now in terms of you know, looking after tenants, managing that side of things.
Yeah, Look, absolutely. First, I fully agree with Jack. The importance of getting residents onboarded into the mobile app is fundamental. And really taking that either one-on-one time, either as smaller groups, whether it's subsets of 5, 10, 15 people, and really explaining the functionalities, making sure people are onboarded, making sure people understand it, and making sure people want to use it and have an incentive to use it is a fundamental piece. Because if not, you find yourself in a scenario in which you have an asset, you have a community, it could be a great community, but that community is not connected because people are not using the app. What's the role? No, what's our role? And to answer your question, what's our role as managers to build community through technology? I think the app really provides a place for people to discover. It's a discovery tool. It's a place where they can see what's happening within the building, what events are being put, whether it's a resident sponsor event or whether it's a building community sponsor event. I think it's also a place for them to be able to exchange and have a sounding board as what are their interests, whether there's something happening in the city over a weekend, or whether there's something happening in TV that they want to have someone to watch it with, and really enable people to connect with the larger community through this mobile app, as well as discover what's happening in the building and what's happening outside the building, but done by the residents of the building.
And Sander, have you seen kind of usage change over time? What's your sense of, increased usage, but also the types of usage that you're seeing particularly?
Yeah, I think generally what we found out is that it's super important to kind of combine mandatory workflows with the community aspect. So that means that if you have a tenant experience platform or app in place, you should first of all make sure that adoption is high. So make sure that if there's a repair issue to be done, if you want to get access to your rental contract, that should be in place because you need to go there. And then the community aspect is really nice to have. So people really first want the basics to be in place. And if that is the case, then they really like this community aspect. And it's actually happening across all asset types in residential. So first we thought expats and student housing would be the most interesting target groups, but actually also in mid-market housing, people are willing to connect with each other and looking for friendships,
Yes.
etc. Yeah.
Great. No, that's really interesting. There's a question coming from Phil as well, and I'm going to tackle that, Phil, in as part of the next section, which is around the importance of communication and responsiveness. So let's start that. And everybody there's also a poll there which is related to this. So do feel free to answer those questions as well. Sander, let's pick up on topic number 3.
Yes, perfect. Let's move to the next slide. We had a look at what is the importance of communication and responsiveness, mainly from the landlord and property management perspective. So this is the question that we would like to ask the audience. So the request is to start the poll.
So the poll is active, so people could start filling out the ticking the one that you think. That's absolutely great. Maybe just highlight those questions online. Oh, you've got them there. That's great. Yeah, good. And we will share those results with you shortly. So let's run through some of these, Sander, as well, just while we're waiting for people to fill those out and get the results back.
Perfect. So you want me to go to the next slide already, Richard?
Yeah, great. Yeah.
Amazing. So from our research, what we discovered is that if you look at the threats, what people are expecting from a landlord, they first of all want to be, let's say that they're looking for good communication and responsiveness, mainly if you talk about maintenance issues. You can also imagine if you have a leakage or a broken escalator, that's really the basics that you want to have resolved for a good living experience. And then people voted for flexibility in lease terms and rental policies, and also the let's say addressing of security issues should be quite easy. And lastly, openness to suggestions and feedback came across. So that really shows that yeah, the basics should be in place. And what we really discovered over the last couple of years is that that can already be quite challenging, because a residential building is really a complex multi-stakeholder structure. You have a lot of service providers involved, the general contractor, the cleaning company, maybe security. Then from the tenant side, you have a lot of changes in the people that live there. So it can already be quite challenging to reach everybody about maintenance repairs coming up, for example. And then apart from that, we see that generally the communication is really scattered. So people need to call a help desk, start emailing to get things done. So that's something that we see is really important to centralize and to make easily accessible. So if we move on to the key takeaway on this subject, we kind of see that the functional threads are the most important, and thereafter the soft threads like openness and feedback are obviously also valued by people, but they are less of a priority.
Okay, great. And that's good. And we will have the final results for you shortly with that. I've put my vote in. So let's see whether those agree. I mean, and just Sandra, in terms of that, again, were there things that surprised you out of that, things that you learned from that?
I think generally, yeah, we are already in the market for 10 years. We kind of discovered this already, I think, throughout the years. I was mainly fascinated by the fact that, yeah, the soft aspects, like the community building part, are also really important factors to improve the tenant retention and tenant satisfaction. Whereas, yeah, most landlords are still mainly, and also property managers mainly, looking at the basics. And now it's really interesting to see also a few of our clients really moving from only concierge services to community management, where the community manager can even do an extra step. They are kind of your life coach. If you are living there, you can also get in touch if you want input or feedback or coaching. And that's, yeah, I think really an interesting trend that you see coming up.
Okay, good. I wanted to just pick up as well. So this came through from Phil. Thank you, Phil, for this, which is, how do you deal with areas, cities or countries with bad Wi-Fi connectivity? Because that obviously impacts the sort of the communication aspect. So I don't know if anybody wants to pick up that, you know, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, I think what we see generally is that, of course, mobile internet became a lot cheaper. So that really helps. And we also figured out that it is important that a solution is multi-channel. So that means accessible through website, app, and email. So, and I think what really stands out is, since people value privacy, they shouldn't be overloaded with communication and information. So from the research, people prefer maybe once a week to have interaction, maybe a few times a week, but it shouldn't be an information overload. Yeah.
Jack, coming to you, let's just pick up on I guess some of the things within, you know, within the survey there. How does that reflect what you're seeing?
So I found that our tenants, our customers, are really good communicators. They're really using the app, and they're communicating in a different kind of way. And when I see that the sought after traits in a landlord are good communication and responsiveness, I'm really, I take that to heart, because very quickly you can see on an app, when they start having a conversation, there might be a complaint about something. And then someone else agrees, and then another person has a comment towards that. And very quickly, if you don't respond, it could get ugly. And so what we've done is we've really noticed, all right, this seems to be an issue. It could be anything. Maybe it's a door that won't close properly or something like that. And we started taking note of that and started, sending out messages to the superintendent out on the building site. We were able to kind of react more quickly than if it was just an email that came from one person and then got filed into the list of things to do. I really like looking at what people are saying, because then we're able to, react in a way that maybe we wouldn't have done before. I also started to see, when people first moved in, of course, there's always this adjustment period. And so there was comments on this and comments on that. And so what we were able to do was bring everybody together for kind of a meeting of all the residents and address all of these issues and say, we've noticed you've been talking about this. What is this about? And what I loved is that they felt heard. They felt heard and that we were responding to what they were saying. It was a new building, so of course there were things that we weren't quite sure of, in terms of processes or how they should run or work. So I told them that was input, and I was thankful for their input. So, that also gave them a sense that when they wrote something, somebody was watching it and someone was reacting.
And Steve, obviously the kind of sought after traits in a landlord, good communication and responsiveness was at the top of the list there from Sandra at 57%, and prompt response to maintenance issues was also their key. Those were the two highest factors. Does that surprise you, or does that also fit with your experience?
Absolutely not. It does not surprise me. I think it really relates very well as we think about residential real estate, where it's coming from. The last 50 years, we think of the typical landlord who accumulated properties, who didn't fix the properties, who didn't want to put money into the properties. And it's probably the biggest room for improvement. And it's where there's an opportunity for folks and groups like ourselves to really create platforms that give residents a different experience in which residents can feel heard. Residents can feel like the landlord and the property manager are responsive, that things are getting fixed. So absolutely does not surprise me. And I do think it's the biggest place for improvement. From an asset standpoint, it's always finding the balance. So what's the balance between my economics? What's the balance between my OPEX, my CAPEX, the margins I have to maintain in order to generate value for shareholders, and as well provide the best experience possible for our residents? And how do we fit this balance when we're trying to deliver affordable by design product in which you don't have the margins that a luxury condo could have or a five-star hotel could have?
Okay, good. Let's share some initial results of the poll, and of course you can still keep adding your view to it. It's on the chat, just underneath the chat are the poll results there, and it will give that question, and you can tick your own answer. But let's share those and see whether or not it agrees with the original one. And Sandra, it would be interesting, I think, just to also pick up with you, I suppose. Interesting that the softer areas there, which don't, obviously tenants aren't looking at as closely. So just interesting to see, I guess, what does that mean in terms of technology? Is that where technology is then playing a role in enabling people, I guess, both the tenants, but also the owners to be able to deliver more quickly? Does that mean that becomes a real focus of the app in some ways?
Yeah, I think it all starts with the right content, the right topics. So if you are hosting events, it's important to communicate about that in a timely manner, but also I think a few other topics are really relevant for both residents, but also for the landlord itself. So if you, for example, talk about ESG, which is really something that can bring a big return on investment for landlords, such an application could also help to, for example, discuss energy consumption, maybe share benchmarks. People can be more aware of how much they are using in terms of energy compared to other people. So it all starts with kind of a content calendar, like what are the topics relevant to discuss, and how does that relate to the services and amenities in the building? Because yeah, you want both online communication, but also a combination of offline meeting spaces. This can be through events, but also shared and common spaces. So that's, I think, something that you should be really looking at if you want to make it a big success. Yeah.
Okay, good. I was having a look at the poll results there, which everybody can see now at the bottom, and maybe we may even be able to pop them on the screen. So what's the main roadblock for landlords striving to meet tenants' expectations around communication responsiveness? Lack of communication skills was 20%, lack of time or resources 30%, and other tasks taking higher priority 20%, lack of technology 30%. So quite an even spread there, but particularly lack of time or resources and lack of technology, both out in the front. I guess, what does that suggest to you, Sandra? Is that kind of what you expected? I mean, the lack of technology is an interesting one, I think.
Yeah, I think if you look at the role division between landlord and property manager, in a lot of cases, the property manager is really, let's say they check the service level based on old-fashioned KPIs. So I think that's something that really stands out for the moment still. So they're really used to traditional ways of working, and generally the property manager doesn't have community building or focusing on tenant retention in their KPIs. So I think that also aligns with a few answers, I think. Yeah.
And Jack, just coming to you, and then I'll pick up with you, Steve, as well. Steve, I mean, we've got lack of communication skills, lack of time or resources, lack of technology, other tasks. So we've got lack of resources, other things taking higher priority. So there's a lot of these things that that are drilling down as well to lack of time and technology rather than necessarily communication skills. What's your sense of that? And I suppose, how do those balance within your business?
So for me, I think what is the interesting thing here, when Sandra said, when Sandra was just speaking, is that we are now moving into operational real estate, right? So a lot of developers had built their buildings, had people move in and either buy or rent and then kind of left. Right now, what we're doing is we're having to recognize that our tenants are customers. They're no longer just tenants. And that means that they are making a choice to move into our building, and we want to retain them. So we have to give them a level of customer service. And this is where technology can help us, because it's identifying the many different ways that we can deliver this service. We have had to bring everybody into the room, everybody that has been in facilities management, building management, and customer management, and really understand what does each person do. And then, as we've been discussing hotelization of real estate and delivery of services, we had a really good example where somebody said, well, in a hotel, if your alarm clock doesn't work, you go out in the hallway and you tell the maid, and then you might even tell somebody down at the breakfast room that your alarm clock isn't working. Then you go to the front desk and tell them it's not working. You basically tell everybody that you meet. And that's kind of the same within here. And so the fortunate thing is that we have an app where people can say it right away, and it can be caught right away by the right person and acted on quickly.
And Sandra, maybe, I mean, Jack has mentioned there about, operational real estate, which is a big focus. Also, big focus around areas like ESG, those kinds of things, sustainability, and those becoming more important, both for tenants and occupiers more widely across the sort of real estate sector. How important is that becoming in terms of communicating areas like that for tenants?
I think especially since the energy prices went so much up, that's definitely something where people are looking at. So I think a lot of stakeholders using Tenant Experience app are of course looking at what's in it for me. So there's a cost savings part, there is a certain return on investment that needs to be taken into account. So for each stakeholder in the value chain, it should bring value. And for the property manager, it's mainly easing the life, making sure that you don't spend more hours than you would spend with traditional means of communication. Yeah.
No, I think that's interesting. And maybe as well, there's a couple of questions that have just come in. One is actually for you, Sander. Thanks very much for that, Melanie. And there's one coming in from Nicholas as well, which is, so for you, Sander, are tenants willing to pay more for having access to a tenant app to receive a better tenant experience? Is that something where people understand and see the difference between, you know, levels of service, if you like, and are happy to pay for those? And also there's a question from Nicholas, which is, are you incorporating AI? And if so, how? Which would be interesting, I think, to pick up from Jack and Esteban and Sander as well. But maybe pick up that first point, Sander.
Yeah. So generally we see that people are willing to pay. I think 54% of the respondents indicated, yes, I would like to pay more. And generally that is via the service charges. And I think it's also a combination of, if you have an interface in place, an infrastructure, it should align again with the facilities that the building has to offer. If the building has to offer meeting rooms or a gym, then it's really convenient if you can book those facilities through an app, for example. If you talk about AI in a tenant experience platform, there are a lot of data points. So you can, for example, see the number of issues that were reported, and AI can really help supporting the property manager to see more easily, what are the trends, what are the things that get broken most often, and how can we deal with that to improve the tenant experience. So I see a big role for AI in a tenant experience platform on the long term, definitely. Yeah.
Okay, great. It would be good just to pick up, Jack, Esteban, anything in terms of AI? Are you incorporating that?
Sorry, go ahead.
Go for it, Jack. Look, we're not using AI as of today. We're looking closely at it, looking at different solutions that can support the business. We think the most valuable is to automatize everything that we can. We're really thinking about top of the funnel. We're really thinking about inquiry management. We're really thinking about contract management and sort of distributing a lot of the reporting, maintenance reports across our board, and how we can leverage AI to do that. That said, we do think there is a value on a human touch point. So as we think about AI and how we incorporate it into the property management business, the big focus is how can we leverage AI to automate the time in order to free time for existing property management teams to have connections, to have person-to-person interactions with residents.
Good. Let's pick up on I guess the next kind of topic now, Sander, in terms of adoption. Let's pick up on that, and then we can run through those and then pick up on the discussion.
Yeah, perfect, Richard. So kind of what we identify is that there is the expectations are high, but not that many landlords are already delivering on that. So at this point, we see that only 70% is using a tenant experience app or digital layer to manage community and to manage, let's say, all the aspects that we just talked about. So that means that the other 83% still uses email, phone calls, traditional communication, which is quite scattered. And according to the research, let's say, 54% is willing to pay. So there's kind of a gap between what the renters want and what the landlord is delivering in terms of this topic. Then if we continue looking at what are the topics that a tenant would find useful to manage through a digital app, Yeah, as previously mentioned, the maintenance and repairs reporting is super important. That's really the basic needs that should be in place. Thereafter comes tenant-landlord communication, but also what stands out is the tracking of energy consumption. 31% voted for that. Then managing payments and looking for building news. So that's, I think, quite interesting. So looking at the key takeaway on this subject, there is a desire to add a digital layer to elevate the living experience. However, not many landlords are already delivering on those expectations. That's kind of what we found out from the survey.
Okay, so deliver and what's your sort of view on that, Sander? Is that the the KPIs that people are looking at are wrong? They're the world has moved on, and in essence we're slightly behind on this, and that we're looking at we're judging on the wrong things at the moment.
Yeah, so generally adoption is indeed low. Sometimes it also has to do with that people don't know where to start. So if you look at a real estate company, they of course have a whole IT ecosystem in place. So what we, for example, deliver is more the front end, so really the interface for the tenant. But then as a backbone, yeah, there's often an ERP to manage your contracts. So sometimes people don't know where to start, and they kind of are, stuck in how to make the first step, to be honest. And I think the old-fashioned KPIs also, of course, don't help. Yeah.
And I guess, Jack, coming to you, just in terms of the, I suppose the focus on tenant retention, customer journey, those kinds of things. Do you think we're doing enough here? Do you think that actually more needs to be done?
Well, I think if we're talking about a tenant journey, it really starts at the beginning. And I mentioned a little bit earlier the importance of doing the onboarding right. I was pretty insistent on this with our first build to rent project here, where our community manager met with every single tenant before they moved in, showed them how to use the app. But not only that, also asked, what are your interests? What are you into? What are your activities? What do you do? And as a result has curated a number of different events and activities based on that knowledge, so that in fact the things that are being planned really do match the demand. And I heard the other day from one of our tenants saying they've never spent so much money in their regular day-to-day as they do now. And that's because they come down to the lounge and they're part of this activity or that activity, and they've been spending without really being conscious of it, but they're very happy about that. The other thing is, and that's of course kind of the softer side of things, but we ensure that they also have to go to the app and to our interface in order to read the manuals. So if they need to know the house rules, if they need to know any of the how to use the oven, for instance, it's all in the app. And in fact, our interface is available on computer, on a big screen in the clubhouse, and also on the phone. So they can access all this information in multiple different ways. But that also drives them to it. So that way they will open it and they will use it.
Okay, good. And it would be interesting, I think, just from you, Esteb, to pick up. I mean, Sander mentioned there, adoption is low, demand is high. How much are people actually using the technology that you've got there versus coming to you with phone calls or email? And from your side, I guess it's much more efficient for it all to be done via the app. But how do you encourage that?
Look, absolutely. I fully agree with Jack mentioned. It's all about the customer journey. It's all about getting people onboarded day zero. And it's all about really streamlining the communication. Unless it's a very urgent matter, the app is the only line of communication that can be used. It's made very clear to residents that maintenance communications have to be done through the app. They cannot do them via email. They cannot do them at the front desk. they can do them via phone call. I think it's all really about setting the standards and defining what are the roles that you're playing with, how should people be playing alongside them, and really, for lack of a better term, forcing people to go into the app, whether it's through communication, because I'm reporting maintenance.
With you, yeah, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, no, just wrapping up, whether it's through being able to access the manual. How do I use my washing machine? What happens if there is the yellow bottom on my washing machine? The only way you can answer this is going through the app. And it's guiding residents to go into the app. I think it's what's foremost for us as we think about customer journey.
Great. And Sander, question coming from Rick. Thanks very much for this, Rick, as well, which is it easy to connect a Tenant app to existing software? Does having software in place make it harder to launch a Tenant app? What's the situation there?
Yeah, I think generally we know some of the best practices are, first of all, if you have an ERP system in place, it makes a lot of sense to connect the ERP, because if there's a new rental contract being signed, the tenant should also be onboarded on the Tenant Experience app. Then generally you might have some hardware in your IT ecosystem, so maybe hardware to open doors, open lockers. I think parcel delivery is also really a big theme here. Generally people want their package the same day, and if you get it delivered by a neighbor, maybe that neighbor is not at home for the first 3 days. So that's also really something that you should be looking at, like how does the whole customer journey look like? What is the IT ecosystem that I should facilitate, that I should have in place to facilitate this? So generally, there are a lot of APIs that can be used to connect all those systems to make the journey complete. Yeah.
Great. It would be interesting, I think, just to get sort of, I guess, final takes from everybody overall on this topic, because obviously we're looking here, you know, the future of tenant experience. I guess just briefly from everybody, where do you see that future? What are the key drivers, I guess, for you in terms of making this really work and dealing with some of the challenges here that have come up and topics that we've been dealing with? Maybe Jack, let's start with your kind of thoughts on where we're heading.
So obviously the app and technology are going to add new levels of efficiency that we didn't have before. We'll be able to respond to our customers in at a much faster rate. But what I think is probably like the golden nugget in all of this is what it can do for the sense of community. We are going to see our buildings become neighborhoods in ways that they weren't before. You know, using that example of it took me 10 years to get to know my neighbors and have drinks with them. It took them 10 minutes. And I think that's really a very important thing that we have to pay attention to and curate and cultivate that, guide it along in the best way that we can. And we don't always know how to do that, but it's something that we need to learn.
Great. And Esteve, over to you.
I think over the next decade or so, communication with property managers, with landlords through technology is going to be a market standard. Everything else is just going to be outdated. It's going to be an expectation from the customer. And I think it's going to leverage, it's going to have major impacts through many ways. Definitely, as Jack said, building community, but I think it's also going to make property managers a lot more efficient. It's going to reduce the number of people the property management companies need in order to operate buildings. And on the customer side, it's going to enhance the experience. It's going to provide a better resident experience, and it's really creating an opportunity for rental housing to become a service and reshape how the experience of people within assets take place.
Yeah, no, I think that's good, and it'd be interesting to get your view, Sander. But also, I know you've come up with some sort of kind of conclusions as well for this.
Yeah, definitely. So I will pull up the last slide to conclude, and then we can wrap up. Yeah, so we listed a few conclusions. First of all, tenants obviously want properties that match the modern lifestyle. But first, you should be looking at relieving operational bottlenecks. And other than that, tenant experience apps can really improve the mental well-being of people if used correctly. So really take into account that people value privacy. So don't overdo it. Don't communicate too much. Communication is deemed the most important threat for landlords, and adoption is still low, but there's definitely a demand. And we also see that there are already companies hiring dedicated tenant engagement managers, and people really focus on bringing IT to the organization, which really helps to be future-proof, I think, as a real estate company.
Thanks very much, Sander. Thank you, Jack. Thank you, Esteb. Thank you to everybody for all of your questions, and interesting as well to see your feedback in terms of the poll results. So thanks very much to everybody for joining us. My thank you to the speakers as well, and for hosting this, co-hosting this with Channels. And if you're watching this on demand, thanks very much for watching. Thank you, everybody.